We need more psychology. We need more understanding of human nature, because the only real danger that exists is man himself. He is the great danger, and we are pitifully unaware of it.
So, Speaker, to the Premier, where will these camps be built? How many people will be detained? And for what reasons? For what reasons can people be kept in these isolation camps? And I'd like to have the Premier assure the people of Ontario.
Member, take a seat.
That unfortunately there is a tremendous amount of noise and harmful misinformation about on the internet. I was chatting with a group of students the other day, and a young woman asked me about COVID internment camps, and I had to explain that as we consume increasing amounts and various sources of information online and around us, we need to continue to be attentive to source. We need to continue to be attentive to comparing various reports and looking for trusted sources like Dr. Tam, like regional public health authorities to tell the truth. We will be introducing mandatory PCR testing at the airport for people returning to Canada. Travelers will then have to wait for up to 3 days at an approved hotel for their test results at their own expense, which is expected to be more than $2,000. Those with negative test results will then be able to quarantine at home under significantly increased surveillance and enforcement. Those with positive tests will be immediately required to quarantine in designated government facilities to make sure they're not carrying variants of potential concern.
I appeared before the Congressional Committee to tell what I knew of activities which might lead to an attempt to set up a fascist dictatorship.
The potential for the disastrous rise of misplaced power exists and will persist.
The very word secrecy is repugnant in a free and open society. And we are, as a people, inherently and historically opposed to secret societies, to secret oaths, and to secret proceedings.
President Bush signed a formal agreement that will end the United States as we know it. And he took the step without approval from either the U.S. Congress or the people of the United States.
The secret organizations of the world power elite are no longer secret.
It's known as the Bilderberg Group. Could their objective be world domination?
I'm Jim Tucker. I've chased Bilderberg for 30 years. I'll never give up the chase. Bilderberg plan for the whole world is nothing less than world government.
I'm not comfortable with that at all. Who elected these guys to run the planet?
They are the elitists. They feel they should run the world for their own selfish interests.
Now we can see a new world coming into view. A world in which there is the very real prospect of a new world order,
Bilderberg is making great progress toward a world government, and only an educated, informed public can stop them in their tracks.
David Rockefeller admits in his own memoirs that he wants to destroy the United States. Right. He's a traitor.
It's good to be back at the Council on Foreign Relations. As Pete mentioned, I've been a member for a long time and was actually a director for some period of time. I never mentioned that when I was campaigning for re-election back home in Wyoming.
Let us never tolerate outrageous conspiracy theories.
I need you to move off the property, please.
Some shots were fired.
There's Bilderbergers right there.
The Trans-Texas Corridor is a vital part because we stop it here in Texas. We stop the New World Order right here in Texas.
This thing started here. And to save this country, we kill this damn thing here.
There is a chance for the President of the United States
this country,
to carry out
we
a
kill
phrase
this
his father used, and that is a New World Order.
Your New World Order will fall. Humanity will defeat you. The answer to 1984 is 1776.
In the near future, Earth is dominated by a powerful world government. Once free nations are slaves to the will of a tiny elite. The dawn of a new dark age is upon mankind. Countries are a thing of the past. Every form of independence is under attack, with the family and even the individual itself nearing extinction. Close to 80% of the Earth's population has been eliminated. The remnants of a once free humanity are forced to live within highly controlled, compact, prison-like cities. Travel is highly restricted. Superhighways connect the megacities and keep the population from entering into unauthorized zones. No human activity is private. AI supercomputers chronicle and categorize every action. A prison planet dominated by a ruthless gang of control freaks whose power can never be challenged. This is the vision of the global elite, their goal. A program of total dehumanization where the science of tyranny is law. A worldwide control grid designed to ensure the overlord's monopoly of power forever. Our species will be condemned to this nightmare future unless the masses are awakened to the New World Order master plan and mobilized to defeat it. Erected by a secretive group, the Georgia Guidestones are a testament to the elite's plan for a world religion, global laws, with a global court and army to enforce it. And set in stone, it is written that the population never rise above 500 million. In this film, you will learn how our world is truly governed. You will see how highly secretive roundtable groups interlock to form a global intelligence network. This group has been steering planetary affairs for hundreds of years. Now, in the final stage, they prepare for open world government. A goal tyrants throughout history have lusted after. Dr. Michael Kaufman is a published ecologist specializing in ecosystem research, forest ecology, and ecosystem classification. Dr. Kaufman played a key role in blocking the ratification of the Convention on Biological Diversity in the U.S. Senate.
The concept of a New World Order has been around for centuries. It's been receiving tremendous play over the last half of the 20th century. George Bush, the first senior president, George Bush, used it a lot in his speeches and really implies that he really wants to see a order in which we have a universal or a global type of governance in which every human being on planet Earth is ultimately responsible to policies that are being formulated at the international level.
It is a big idea, a new world order.
President Bush said that the New World Order was in tune, and that's what they were working for. The UN is part of that government. They're working right now very significantly for a North American Union. That's why there's a lot of people in Washington that don't care too much about our borders. They have a philosophic belief that national sovereignty is not important. It's also the reason I have made very strong suggestion that we need not be in the United Nations for our national security.
It's really always the same. You go back throughout all of history, the Roman Empire, the Soviet Union, Hitler during the Nazism was always saying that it's going to create the utopia for the average person, when in fact, history always shows that it does exactly the opposite.
Conquest and empire is as old as civilization.
All right, welcome to the Bio-PsyWar from the TylerBlawyer.com live stream. Today we're doing strategic psychological operations. We're going to be doing evaluation on some of the various different operations going on, as I do see this as a psyop being carried out. And when I say this, we're going to go more into that. We've been doing a series called the Bio-PsyWar. There's now 3 episodes, the Bio-PsyWar. Let's pull this up here so you could see series as thus far. And one of the updates on the site that I've made just to get this a little bit more accessible to the people that are looking for the actual series itself. So if you go on to TylerBlawyer.com and you can scroll down and have the latest posts are here. And then a little bit further down, you'll see this new title card for the Bio-PsyWar. If you click that, you'll be able to see the latest episode in the series, as well as scroll through and see the series thus far. Then also, there's a few contextual items that we should cover there that you could also check out in reference to what we're covering today, which would be Grand Theft World Podcast episode number 7. Grand Theft World Podcast episode number 11. Here, let's see if I can get looks like my level needs to come up just a little bit there. And doing it live. And then I would also check out Dave Emery Archives for the last year since February, about starting out with maybe episode 1111, and go from there from the Bio-Psyop Apocalypse. A lot of the sources and references that I locate come out of that archive, and not as someone who's not trying to credit where I'm finding some of this information. I've listed the more important episodes here that I think should be checked out, as well as some other papers, including the important Fort Detrick lab being shut down after a failed safety inspection, Peter Daszak's Eco Health Alliance, and the connections there between the Pentagon and the pandemic science, and a biosecurities failure article talking about the USAMRIID biosecurity failure and the shutdown of the Fort Detrick lab in Maryland. So let's go over. Actually, this goes into. Let's just read a little bit of this article. For the past 50 years, the nation's leading biodefense laboratory has been the forefront of combining infectious disease threats in the United States, but the U.S. Army Medical Research Institute for Infectious Disease at Fort Detrick in Maryland has been largely missing in action from the fight containing the coronavirus. So far, more than 22,000 people in America have been diagnosed with the virus, so on and so forth. Yes, so this is the reference to that article. I was just making sure I was saying the right thing there. And then also the bats gene editing and bioweapons article, recent DARPA experiments raises concern amid coronavirus outbreak, that we read into the stream last week for the Bio-PsyWar. So those are the just more or less see also articles. In today's show, you'll be able to find the resources, and anything that I discussed that's not already been covered here will be added to the resource and show notes. I've been trying to get in a method of having the show notes up actually before I go live, and that way, if you're curious, you can go pull up that resource right while I'm doing the show. Okay, so now in a line, I missed a clip there at the end that I wanted to play, but that's okay. Maybe we can squeeze that in at the end. In fact, let me just drop that down on my cue card here, and then perhaps, yeah, that might be a better place for it anyway. Funny how things like that work out. Now, that was Voldemort, or he who cannot be named, Mr. AJ there in the beginning, who produced that film Endgame. And before that, we obviously saw, that insane dude up there in Canada, Trudeau, talking about how, there'll never be any kind of government-ran camps or anything like that, or quarantine facilities. And then, January of 2021, there he is talking about how, if you come up positive after traveling into the country, you'll have to then go to a government-sponsored hotel, he said. It's not a camp, it's a hotel, or maybe a group of hotel rooms chained together where only the people that were quarantining go, and we'll call it a hotel. It's not a quarantine situation, or it's not a concentration, it's not a camp, anyway, is what he was trying to clarify there. So that was helpful. Thank you for clarifying what's going on there. And also, we went into the film Endgame. Now, say what you want about Alex Jones. I don't necessarily think that Alex Jones has been 100% in integrity throughout his years of reporting and journalism. However, if your goal is to find out the information, you can weed through certain problematic aspects of someone's work. And then, I don't go and browse Infowars.com every day to find out what's going on. But the Endgame documentary is something that tied in, I think, to the Bio-PsyWar and needed to kind of go there to build out where we're at in the series, as well as give people reference to go check that out. And there's plenty of things that are discussed about the Bio-PsyWar that are in that documentary that I would definitely go check out. I think that, like I said, you can throw the baby out with the bathwater, or, you could try to objectively take in the information, use critical thinking to take away the things that don't make sense and are contradictions, go research all the sources and references and links yourself, and then that voice or that messenger can be removed. You don't necessarily need them to get the information. And so that's why I'm not, playing the whole clip here or something, the whole movie. I can give the context that I was trying to give to that documentary, and we'll be building that out in the Bio-PsyWar, which will be a longer term type of thing that I'll continue to do as long as I have the guests and the material to cover into the show, and until it becomes more of a well-rounded thing that I can hand off to the next series that I want to do. I had talked about in late 2020 of doing the Creature of Control series, and that did kind of, forcefully move out of the way for what's going on currently and the stuff that I wanted to get into the record for my show and for the series and the stream that's going out into TylerBlair.com. We've been, since 2015, covering the Creature of Control, the aspect of things that are more or less the if you look at Gustave Le Bon's The Crowd, or it's coming from the side of looking at it not just from, they're doing these things to us and this stuff is happening to us, but rather the psychological things that go on with the actual individuals that participate in their own enslavement. And then we did a series called Falling into the Movement Traps, and how people, fall into logical fallacies, logical traps. They fall into movements which have edicts and things that don't make a lot of sense. They become wrapped up in fervor. They can get into things called groupthink. And that whole series was called Falling into the Movement Traps. It goes into the nature of your situation as it is already voluntary, and that claiming that the contracts in your life, that the situations in your life are involuntary, and that there are things being done to you which are outside of your control, and that you can't take control of as far as your actions go, is a problematic stance to have, as well as even going into refuting, and not necessarily refuting as a whole, but critiquing anarchism and things like that, voluntarism, the non-aggression principle, and things like that. So, and those topics we broke down thoroughly through a series of presentations live, similar to this, how they were done live with slideshow presentations. You can check those out in the TylerBlair.com front page. There's the original series we did, Liberty Lifestyle, on this YouTube channel, TylerBlair.com. Before that, it was the Creature of Control. Then you can find the Falling into the Movement Traps series, and now we're on to the Bio-PsyWar, as well as a lot of walk and talks in between that I've done to kind of fill in, where I'm coming from, and to show the progression of where my research has come from then till now. And if you go back and listen to the very first episode of the Creature of Control, you can see that I've been basically talking about the same thing for the last 6 years or so, and plan to kind of go into more depth, because there's so much to uncover, obviously, that I can't talk about at all. And with the ongoing events, we try to keep up with some of that, but we're not necessarily swimming in the latest and greatest ongoing events, things that are going on either. That's not necessarily my style or my forte, but I do try to pull from that and weave it into the tapestry of the overall big picture. So just to go into a little bit of context on that opening clip here, we have from Activist Post. Let's see if I can. Yeah, that's fine. Activist Post. COVID detainment facilities go from conspiracy theory to official government policy in 3 months. From Matt the Agorist. The COVID-19 internment camp conspiracy is totally false, was this other headline from October 21st of 2020. And, that was an article that came out, saying how ridiculous it is that there would even be people talking about that kind of a thing going on. And then here it says, by Matt the Agorist, I asked the government if people should prepare for internment camps. Ontario Provincial Member of Parliament MPP Randy Hillier asked the Central Canadian Government Legislature during question period of October 7th, 2020. During his inquiry over the country's police policy to detain citizens, Hillier's microphone was cut and he was silenced and told to sit down. You saw that in the opening clip that I used. His words would go unnoticed, however, and the internet picked up on its... His words would not go unnoticed, however, and the internet picked up on it, and the memes began to flow on how Canada was about to start involuntarily detaining COVID-19 patients in government facilities. It is important to note that Hillier's claims were blown out of proportion online, with disinformation flowing freely about children being taken from parents to people to people being held in facilities for the rest of their lives. None of this is true. Predictably, the quote fact checkers unquote picked up the obviously false claim and came out in full force, referring to Hillier's statements and the memes that followed as, quote, conspiracy theory, unquote. That is totally false. Yes, many of the claims were totally false. However, government-run quarantine facilities are allowed in Canada under the Quarantine Act passed in 2005 under Prime Minister Paul Martin. In June 2020, the federal government issued its third order requiring every person entering Canada to quarantine for 14 days. The pushback against the online conspiracy theories, quote-unquote, were these quarantine sites were, quote, voluntary, unquote, for Canadian citizens. Well, of course, that's the thing about citizenship, is that once you've voluntarily become a citizen, you are now obligated through the contractual obligations of that law, system of law. Not like that there's not ways to break contracts or ways to get out of contracts, but that's the system of citizenship, is that it's voluntary in nature. So that's what they're saying, that you have it is voluntary to get into citizenship, okay? But once you're in it, it's similar to like the military. Like once you're voluntarily in the military, you don't get to then choose what you're going to do and how you're going to proceed. Like you're going to follow orders at that point. But it is, for the most part, especially nowadays, voluntary to get into the military. And I'm just pulling up my digital online Webster's 1828 here and going to the word voluntary. Voluntary, acting by choice or spontaneously, acting without being influenced or impelled by another. Free, or having power to act by choice, not being under restraint, as a man is a voluntary agent, proceeding from choice or free will. And if you scroll down, let's see. Actually, let's go to a volunteer. A volunteer is a person who enters into a military or other service of his own free will. In military affairs, volunteers enter into service voluntarily, but when in service, they are subject to discipline and regulations like other soldiers. They sometimes serve graciously, but often receive a compensation, entering into a service of free will as volunteer companies. So you're entering into the service, but once you're contractually bound to your military contract, there can be real world repercussions for not then continuing to act upon your own free will and decide to do what's right and wrong by yourself. Hence the problem of being a police officer or a military man, that you have to end up carrying out acts regardless of what you think is right or wrong, which is the definition of what a bad person is, or evil, essentially, doing what you're told without thinking. And this was not an excuse at the so-called, Nuremberg trials, which were supposed to rot out all the things that went on and horrible crimes against humanity that went on in World War II by the Nazis, but really, avoided all the Nazi scientists that the United States was bringing in under Operation Paperclip. Anyway, so let's not get caught up there. I thought that was interesting that these are voluntary. Well, let's just keep in mind that according to a volunteer in the Webster's 1828, once you're in that service, you are subject to discipline and regulations like other soldiers. So in that example, like a military person or other service of his own free will, such as citizenry, you don't have a choice by that contract to just morally choose what you feel is right or wrong to do. And that's the precedence that they're laying down here in this article. So continuing on, the federal government has, in this Activist Post article that came out in February 4th of 2021 by Matt the Agorist, the federal government has announced funding for voluntary quarantine sites for some of the country's homeless and has made plans to expand self-isolation capacity for returning international travelers without suitable places to go, But Canadians will not be compelled to leave their homes for so-called COVID camps, a spokesperson for the health ministry, Patty Hajdu, told CBC News in October to dispel the conspiracy theories, right? But then they've changed a lot of what she was saying back then already. In October, the Prime Minister Trudeau even responded saying the claims of mandatory COVID-19 detainments were harmful misinformation. Unfortunately, this is quoting Trudeau, there is a tremendous amount of noise and harmful misinformation. And just check here to make sure we're not speaking. Silence. Trudeau said, I had to explain that we consume increasing amounts of various sources of information online and around us, We need to continue to be attentive to the source, and we need to continue to be attentive to comparing various reports and looking for trusted sources, something that we, just me and parenthetically here, something that we here at TylerBloyer.com try to do on a weekly basis. The answer is no. We are building containment or internment camps, the health minister's. The answer is no. We are not building containment or internment camps, the health minister spokesperson said in a statement. That was in October, and over the months, the government has moved the goalpost on how travelers are treated. Now, even travelers with negative tests will be forced to quarantine at their home under government surveillance. While this is only for those engaging in international travel, as we've seen, the goalposts moves. We've seen the goalpost moves. And here they're quoting Dr. Theresa Tam, I think. Oh no, here, Trudeau again. Those with negative test results will then be able to quarantine at home under significantly increased surveillance and enforcement, Trudeau said in a press conference last week. In regards to the increased surveillance, this will include home visits from private COVID security personnel. There will be increased security contractors that will do more, I would say, door knocking to check on people who are in quarantine, said Dr. Theresa Tam, Canada's chief public health officer, on Friday. I was just going to see if this links to an actual video, because that would be interesting just to hear. That being said, it looks like it's an article from CNN Travel. All right, so I think you get this sense of this article. Let's see if we can scroll down a little bit. Source: The Free Thought Project. I'm reading this on Activist Post. Okay. So yeah, basically, there you go. They're telling you in one breath a few months before, and that's how this whole thing's been the whole time. The goalpost keeps shifting in general with every bit of information that's come out. Everything from 14 days to quarantine and just stay home and social distance, and everything will go back to normal, to 2 months, to 6 months, to January, to when the vaccines come, and now, oh, well, the vaccines aren't working, and now there's mutations of coronavirus. To, there will not be, it'll be voluntary, and, as we've broken down here plenty of times, it's all voluntary. The people, that comply with any government edict are acting voluntarily, even up until the point where they are, let's say, like physically threatening you, maybe even with murder. At that point, it's still voluntary how you choose to respond to that. So we won't, let's just pull up at this point in time, I think it would be good to play the clip that I was going to have in the beginning. And so we'll just go to that really quick right now.
Everything we're doing is basically voluntary on behalf of people, right? State government, local government, federal government doesn't have the power to enforce stay-at-home orders. If 19 million people said, I'm going out today, they would go out. Everything we do.
So see, Cuomo knows that it's all voluntary. He knows how it works. You got to get up there. You got to look authoritative. You got to speak. You got to speak from the deep, diaphragm here, and just get out there with a little bit of dark shading lighting behind you and some fresh makeup, and get that, slick looking thing that he's got going on, slick gangster style voice, and just tell people how it is, This is how it's going to be now. This is how it's going to be, and we're going to do it like this, and we're going to get people in these ventilators, and we're going to hide ventilators, and we're going to put people in nursing homes that don't need to be there, and we'll just walk away after everybody's dead, and it won't matter because I'm the governor, I'm the mayor, I'm going to be the president, What you think of this, I don't know. That wasn't the best Cuomo impersonation. That was definitely ad hoc on the fly. But that's, again, not to make too much of a joke of it, but when they're telling you it's going to be voluntary, just keep in mind that they are looking at that from a legal perspective. That's usually what they're doing when they're calling you a citizen and it's voluntary. They don't look at it like that means you have the free will to do what you want to do. That's not what that means. It means you will comply to the contractual agreement that we have here, which is what we tell you to do is what you're going to do. That's what they mean by that. So they're just using language that sounds like it's a lot better. So let's see what this article finishes up here. I'm noticing that they leave a little bit to be seen. Immediately required does not mean voluntary. It means that citizens will be forced into these facilities. Calling them mandatory government facilities instead of internment camp is a matter of semantics. Internment is defined as the state of being confined as a prisoner, especially for political or military reasons. Does that not sound like what Trudeau said in the statement above? See the shift in policy happening in the video below. Indeed, according to the government's own website, violators will be imprisoned. And they link to this website here, consequences. This is travel.gc.ca. Consequences for failure to comply with the emergency order. Failure to comply with this order is an offense under the Quarantine Act and could lead to imprisonment or fines. So it's voluntary, right? You can voluntarily go to jail if you don't want to comply. This is the travel restrictions in Canada. I'm going to go ahead and add this into the show notes, and we'll do it live because I want to make sure that that gets in there for people that would like to see. And this is a good example of how I can just add something into the show notes really quick, live, piss everybody off in the future who has to listen through this. But I want to test out hitting update. See, now somebody could actually go while watching and hit that article. Hello, people in the live chat. Nice to see you today. Thanks for joining. Okay, just making sure that there's things going correctly with the tech here. I can still hear myself talking in the monitor on YouTube, so that's good. Oh, that's a very interesting series of articles there. Let's continue on with the Bio-PsyWar for today, if I can find my way back home here. When you're doing it live, it's like there's something about it that I'm still not quite used to, that I get a little flustered and I suddenly can't find the most basic things on my computer. So I have to work through that, and thank you for allowing the time for these sort of fumbles and stumbles across the tech here and things going on. At least today I'm going to shoot for not muting myself for a 1.5-minute segment. Has been my signature style. But what we hope to today is just continue the narrative of adding to, that the SARS coronavirus, the SARS-CoV-2, which causes COVID-19 in people, the current plague and pandemic that's going on, is not only something that may have leaked out of a lab or been released out of a lab, or that lab could very well be a patsy, which is sort of more what I lean towards, and not necessarily that there was a mistake with releasing it, but that was actually intentionally released as part of the Bio-PsyWar, bio-psyop that is going on, and as a bioweapon, something that was created back, which we'll show here in a minute, that there were very similar, if not the same, type of viruses being created in a lab back in 2008 in the United States by the United States military, and that The Guardian and other articles in 2018 warning about the potential problems with the lab gain-of-function research and bioweapons research, but also that the false flag nature of it, or the pandemic, or the psychological operation nature of this event is such that some people, I still know, are completely opposed to thinking that there's anything real going on at all with this, and that's something that I take issue with, because I think that there is something going on real, and that similar to say how, well, 9/11 was an inside job or 9/11 was a false flag terrorist event. Well, that doesn't mean that the towers weren't brought down, right? I don't want to say how they were brought down, but it doesn't mean just because it wasn't legit what they're telling us, or the NIST, investigation leaves a lot of things to be wondered and questioned, or that there's clear ties between the, connections between some people, such as like Larry Silverstein, and just a lucky Larry Silverstein gets $4.9 billion in insurance money after making the purchases of those buildings, and Building 7 just happened to collapse under which he owned, and no planes hit that tower, and all these sort of things that can be left for questioning. So similar to how I'm not saying that doesn't mean it didn't happen though. Like, it did happen, similar to COVID-19, and so I'm questioning it in a way that's saying it is real, it is happening, but what we're being told is probably not correct. The media, the news media, has been infiltrated for a long time now, probably going back to JFK assassination and before, post-World War II period, and the United States becoming part of the United Nations, as well as the Council on Foreign Relations body infiltrating into the United States past 1921 and getting its tentacles out there into the media. You can now see that people connected in with the Council on Foreign Relations and the United Nations and things like that are well in control of the American news media. So yes, my premise is that we're not being told the 100% truth. There will be leaks coming out in the media about how something is being created in a lab, or there's potentials for this thing being coming from the meat from China, or from labs even in China, but that all is detracting from, taking away from some of these things that need to be closely investigated, such as the Whitney Webb article that we discussed last week and went into, and we'll touch on today as well. So let's just get into that a little bit. If we go to the article from The Guardian that I was mentioning, which I actually have printed out here at my desk, it's also there on the screen, but it's one that I wanted to put in my folder. So you might ask, well, why would you print that out if you had it on your screen there? The answer is I'm creating this binder which has the Bio-PsyWar papers that we've been discussing, Information Operations Roadmap, One Right Turn, and We're There, that we read a few episodes back, as well as the Psychological Operations U.S. Army Doctrine Field Manual number 33 that we read. So that way, certain articles like this one that might get scrubbed or changed or moved or links broken, in the future, I can have all the documents together and pull them out, the actual paper, physical copies. And this is a shorter document here now anyway, but let's just read through this. So this is from The Guardian on, let's just looking for the date here, Tuesday, June 19th, 2018. The rapid rise of synthetic biology, a futuristic field of science that seeks to master the machinery of life, has raised the risk of a new generation of bioweapons, according to the major U.S. report into the state of the art. Advances in the area mean that scientists now have the capability to recreate dangerous viruses from scratch, make harmful bacteria more deadly, and modify common microbes so that they churn out lethal toxins once they enter the body. The three scenarios are picked out as a threat of highest concern in a review of the field published on Tuesday by the U.S. National Academy of Sciences at the request of the Department of Defense report that was commissioned The Department of Defense report was commissioned to flag up the ways in which powerful technologies might be abused to focus the minds on how best to prepare. Michael Imperial, chair of the report committee and professor of microbiology and immunology at the University of Michigan, said the review used only unclassified information, and so has no necessary. Sorry, I lost my place. I was looking up at the screen there. Let me just start that over. Michael Imperial, chair of the report committee of the professor of microbiology and immunology at the University of Michigan, said the review used only unclassified information and so has no assessment of which groups, if any, might be pursuing novel biological weapons. We can't say how likely any of these scenarios are, he said, but we can talk about how feasible they are. In a report, the scientists described how synthetic biology, which gives researchers precision tools to manipulate living organisms, quote, enhances and expands, unquote, which could be, gain of function. Could have easily just have said that as well. Opportunities to create new bioweapons. Quote, as the power of the technology increases, that brings a general need to scrutinize where harms could come from, unquote, said Peter Carr, a senior scientist at MIT's Synthetic Biology Center in Cambridge, Massachusetts. More than 20 years ago, Eckhard Wimmer, the geneticist at Stony Brook University in New York, highlighted the potential dangers of synthetic biology in dramatic style when he recreated poliovirus in a test tube. Earlier this year, a team at the University of Alberta built an infectious horsepox virus. The virus is a close relative to smallpox, which may have claimed 500 million lives in the 20th century. Today, the genetic code of almost any mammalian virus can be found online and synthesized. The technology to do this is available now, said Imperial. It requires some expertise, but it is something that is relatively easy to do, and that's why it tops the list. So, moving to another article here that we have, buttons on my Stream Deck. The 2008 report that I was talking about. I may have said that it was, let's just read about this here. So I pulled this up shortly before the show because I felt like it was something that was worth having in there, along with what was being said in the Guardian article there, that they can basically like 3D print viruses in the lab at home now. Not literally 3D print, but you can find a lot of the genetic code of mammalian let's see, what did it say? It said, today, the genetic code of almost any mammalian virus can be found online and synthesized. And here we have synthetic recombinant bat SARS-like coronavirus is infectious in cultured cells and in mice. December 2008, preceding a National Academy of Science, Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences, DOI, 10.1073, source PubMed. The abstract and figures defining prospective pathways by which zoonosis evolves and emerges as human pathogens is critical for anticipating and controlling. Centered here. Critical for anticipating and controlling both natural and deliberate pandemics. However, predicting tenable pathways of animal to human movements has been hindered by challenges in identifying reservoir species, cultivating zoonotic organisms in culture, and isolating full-length genomes for cloning and genetic studies. The ability to design and recover pathogens reconstituted from synthesized cDNAs has the potential to overcome these obstacles by allowing studies of the replication and pathogenesis without identification of reservoir species cultivating of primary isolates. Here we report the design, synthesis, and recovery of the largest synthetic replicating life form, a 29.7 kb bat severe acute respiratory syndrome, SARS-like coronavirus, bat S-CoV, and a likely progenitor to the SARS-CoV epidemic. To test the possible route of emergence from the cultivable bat S-CoV to humans, SARS-CoV, we designated a consensus bat S-CoV genome and replaced the bat S-CoV spike receptor binding domain RBD with the SARS-CoV RBD, bat SRBD. Bat SRBD was infectious in the cell culture and in mice and was efficiently neutralized by antibodies specifically for both bat and human CoV-like spike proteins. Rational design, synthesis, and recovery of hypothetical recombinant viruses can be used to investigate mechanisms of transspecies movements of zoonosis and has great potential to aid in rapid public health responses. So again, back in 2008, they were synthesizing bat-like coronaviruses and experimenting with SARS-CoV-1 in the lab. This article can be found in the show notes, as well as the Guardian article that went over synthetic biology raises risks of new bioweapons, a U.S. report warns. Okay, so that is a nice little thread there that we can see that this kind of studies have been going on for some time now. Sorry, I didn't losing control of my set here. That you can read into. Now, what we're going to do is deep dive a little bit further down the rabbit hole here and go into the Pandemic Changed Cities, a municipal spending on voter extremism paper written about Germany from 1918 to 1933 by Christian Blickel. He is a Federal Reserve Bank of New York staff report person who wrote this report, and it goes into some interesting things that I've highlighted and brought up about, the pandemic and the effects of that possibly radicalizing the people in Nazi Germany, or having effects of radicalizing and adding to them later on becoming a National Socialist country, and then the leading up to the World Wars, and also, or World War II in this case, and then also the outcome of that being, obviously, well, we'll go into the article here. So let's pull this up. Again, this was written, this is another one that I printed out so I can have it for the record for myself, but you find it in the show notes, and it's a downloadable PDF that you can go through the full thing if you'd like there. But we'll go ahead and pull that up here. A thick one. So what we got here is paperclip, which needs to be pulled out for Operation Pull Out the Paperclip that is bent because there's such a thick amount of documents here. Again, pandemics change cities, municipal spending, and voter extremism in Germany, 1980. Blickel. Introduction. This paper investigates how the influenza outbreak in 1918 to 1920 affected German cities in the years after the pandemic. In particular, I analyze city spending on amenities as well as voting for the extremist party in Germany between 1925 and 1933. A multitude of factors, many of which were specific to Germany in the 1920s, determined city spending and contributed to the rise in extremism. However, both per capita spending and the vote share obtained by extremists varied significantly across the municipalities. This variation represented tangible differences between individual cities that reflect the preferences or beliefs of inhabitants. Understanding the degree to which such preferences are correlated with major pandemics can offer insights to academic and policymakers alike. Germany represents a suitable case study for the analysis, given that is suffered a high number of influenza deaths with significant regional variation, recorded detailed information on disease fatality, city expenditures, voting behavior, etc. and experienced a well-documented and researched increase in extremist voting in 1920 to 1930. This paper documents several interesting and novel findings. First, areas which experienced a greater relative population decline due to the spread of influenza spend less per capita on their inhabitants in the following decade. This holds especially for the spending on amenities more likely to be consumed by the young, for example, school funding. Second, influenza deaths of 1918 are correlated with an increase in the share of votes won by right-wing extremists, such as the National Socialist Workers' Party, the Nazi Party. In the crucial election of 1932 to 1933, this correlation holds even when controlling for the city's religious makeup, city wages, regional unemployment, city-level exposure to the hyperinflation of 1923, the share of the right-wing votes before the First World War, and the other characteristics associated with extremist vote share. A one standard deviation increase in the proportion of the population killed by influenza was associated with around 0.8% higher share of the votes won by the National Socialist Party. The correlation between influenza mortality and vote share was negative for left-leaning parties who also considered extremists such as communists. I'll just read my highlighted part again because I kind of fumbled through that a bit. A one standard deviation increase in a proportion of the population killed by influenza was associated with around 0.08% higher share of votes won by the National Socialist Party. The correlation between influenza mortality and vote share was negative for left-leaning parties, also considered extremists such as the communists. Now, we will consider the source being the Federal Reserve Bank of New York here. Staff reports, again, this was from May of 2020. And we're just more or less getting the context here of some of this hard data and how this man has interpreted it in this way. And there's lots of data to back up these claims, so it should be an interesting piece of information, being that it's coming from the Federal Reserve Bank of New York and a study that they performed. So flipping through here, I had another section highlighted out here on page 3. This paper contributes to a broad and rapidly growing literature. First, it contributes to recent papers dealing with effects of the spread of disease on various social and economic outcomes. Papers on such topics have grown in importance. As the effects of COVID-19 become more pronounced, Eichbaum et al. 2020, for instance, show that less consumption brought about by social distancing and forced store closures during the COVID-19 pandemic will reduce the severity of the pandemic, but may deepen subsequent recessions. Alfaro et al. 2020 show that the changes in the progression and spread of COVID-19 virus lead stock market returns. Bartik et al. 2020 survey small and medium-sized enterprises. They document a significant heterogeneity in the degree in which firms are affected and the beliefs in the SMEs about their own future and aggregate economic recovery. Horner-Nesch 2020 shows that measures taken to combat the virus, such as social distancing, can affect people's mental health and attitudes. Berstenzini et al. 2020 shows how important mass media can be by highlighting that exposure to misinformation can have long-term health consequences for the exposed. So he's citing these different papers, which you can find more about in the notes here and in the actual doc. Show notes, you can actually look into those if you're interested. The next section I had pointed out here in this document was, finally, These works tie to an older, though ever-growing body of research that analyzes the gains made by extremists, first and foremost the National Socialist Party in the elections of 1932 and 1933. The causes for the gains made by the National Socialists between 1928, when they took power, over 2% of the vote, and 1933, when they cemented their hold on power, have been much debated. For instance, Aiken Green 2018, Ferguson 1996, Ferguson 1997, Hoffman 1965, Straumann 2019, Timon 1971, and Timon 1990 for a few views. Many of the preliminary causes are likely to have been economic in nature, related to unemployment, inflation, and large expenditure cuts. See Golfe Villa et al. 2019 for an excellent overview. However, many additional factors have contributed in some way to the party's rise. Geary 2002 summarizes some of the literature on the extremist right-wing success in capturing working-class votes. Voglander and Voth 2012 and Voglander and Voth 2012b highlighted the importance of anti-Semitism in driving extremist voters. Importantly, they show how persistent certain sentiments, especially those pertaining to the hatred of others, such as anti-Semitism, can be. In many regions, the sentiments lasted hundreds of years. Satyanath et al. 2017 shows that the rise of fascism was correlated with the city-level density of associations. Ferguson's and Foth 2008 show the importance of links between the National Socialist Party and a large industrial firms. Indena et al. 2015 shows that propaganda helped fuel the rise of National Socialist Party. Importantly, they highlighted that the areas with pre-existing anti-Semitism were more susceptible to racist propaganda. The paper contributed to the above research by showing that the pandemics affect the provision of public goods and may be correlated with the extremist voting, an effect that may be exacerbated by pre-existing anti-minority sentiments or disease-focused propaganda. Now, the way that would be looked at as in the modern world in America would be the current rise of, anti-freedom, anti-liberty, anti-conservative, people who stand for individualism rather than the group's rights and things like that. So being forced to take medical devices rather than having the right to choose, and the demonization of these people that are not willing to fight the disease would be considered the people that need to be attacked. My reading into this as far as how it transposes into current times. Now let's go on. He's talking about the tables. The tables that are being referenced in this are found in the back. So we're almost through the parts of this that I wanted to highlight, but you can find the data if you want to go look at some of these graphs that he's representing and pointing at. So tables and data sets you can see. So for those that want to look at those, feel free to go ahead and do that. So table 4 being talked about here. The observation that the share of the vote won by the right-wing extremist parties correlated with influenza mortality can be corroborated in regression. Sorry, my mind gets a little thinking about everything and then I forget that I'm reading out loud in a live stream. The observation that the share of the vote won by the right-wing extremist parties correlated with influenza mortality can be corroborated in regressions. In table 4.1, in table 4, I regress the share of the vote obtained by the National Socialist Party in 1933 to 1932 and 1932 on a number of regional and city characteristics. Column 1 makes use of the most basic specifications that include only the measures of town size and change in the region's population from before to just after the war, 1910 to 1918, from World War I. The percentage of the population that is Jewish or Catholic in 1925, the vote share won by the right-wing extremist in the election of 1912, to the change of the city's population just before the war in 1930. So skipping down here, because that's talking about more of the data in the chart, the share of votes obtained by the National Socialist Party was positively related to the share of the population that died from influenza in 1918. The baseline result remains significant in each specification. One standard deviation increase in the share of population that died from influenza is correlated with a between 1.6 and 2% larger vote share won by the National Socialist Party. Economic controls and the increase in the share of the population that is unemployed or drop in wages are also strongly related to an increase in the share of vote obtained by the National Socialist Party. However, including such controls does not remove the direct effect of influenza mortality. Notice that they were talking about the propaganda, the disease propaganda, and all that also contributing disinformation. People supporting the Nazis. Order, okay. Conclusion. Evidence suggests that the deaths brought, and just so people can know what we're reading before I read the conclusion, pandemic changed cities, municipal spending, and voter extremism in Germany. 33 by Christian Blickel from the Federal Reserve Bank of New York staff reports. Staff report number 921, May 2020, revised June 2020. Evidence suggests that the deaths brought about by the influenza pandemic of 1918 to 1920 may have shaped German society going forward. Regional variations in influenza mortality was related to subsequent city spending on various amenities for its population. Cities that saw a greater share of their population die due to the influenza spent less per capita going forward. Perhaps more importantly, influenza deaths themselves are correlated with the share of votes won by extremists, specifically the extremist National Socialist Party. This effect dominates many of other effects and is persistent even when controlling for the influenza of local unemployment, city spending, population changes brought about by the war, and local demographics, or when instrumenting for influenza mortality. The results are possibly a consequence of changes in society preferences following a pandemic. In particularly, the pandemic may have interacted with existing deep-seated anti-Semitism, anti-outsider sentiment, which was further fed by the National Socialist propaganda that linked disease to minorities. Given a number of econometric challenges, care must be taken in the interpretation of the results. Nevertheless, this study offers a novel contribution to the decisions surrounding the long-term effects of pandemics. Just something to look out for and be aware of. Some of those conclusions I might not agree with. Some of the results I'd have to look at more closely. But that is a primary resource that you can pull up from the show notes and look through yourself as far as some of those conclusions that he came to. Like I said, I think the idea would be that with the propaganda and with the deaths and the different ways that the government reacted, that may have contributed to people voting more extremist, even for Nazis, at that time. So it's something to be aware of as we are now in the aftermath of the Bio-PsyWar that's been ongoing. So as we head down the road here on this episode, today on COVID, the Bio-PsyWar strategic psychological operations. We're covering a little bit of the data and the analysis of the research there from that Federal Reserve Bank of New York staff report document, but also going through and tying in some of the more some of the evidence that I have pulled up, regarding the offensive, defensive, bioweapons research, and how something like this could be intentionally created in a lab to help study the functionality of it, to make vaccines, to make antidotes against it, and then that some ill-intentioned or even bad actor, we went into that quite a bit last week, could release that very easily now as a bioweapon through the air, through major cities, through spraying, large dense populations. The government could easily have done this to make it look like China was the vector, that the Wuhan lab was where the leak was. Anything, could have been done with the different populations, the Uyghur population in China, the different large, dense areas in China could have been used to, help spread the virus. And that could basically very easily be done now. People in terrorist groups could come up with the idea to do this and very easily deploy the technology, which is basically available now online to go and look at for the average person to go and be able to synthesize. Now, it's probably not all that easy, and I'm not a person that works in these labs that could go and tell you how to do that kind of thing. But from, the rapid growth in technology and where we're at now with this sort of bio research, essentially it looks as though people could easily create a lot of variations of coronaviruses and be spreading them around. And my theory is that this is part of the bio-psy apocalypse, the Bio-PsyWar. The bio-psyop apocalypse is Dave Emery's term for the situation that we're in. Him and I tend to agree on the premise that this was intentionally released as part of an information war. You can go back to previously in early 2020 when I was saying this, where I feel like that this was a planned, weaponized event, not just with the actual viruses that were released or whatever you want to call these, genetic chimera viruses that were created and funded by DARPA, heavily looking into those types of things, and also now funding the people who are, making the vaccines for these types of things. So again, just going through, tying in some of those details for you today, and we're going to go into a clip here. These are a couple clips just on psychological warfare in general. Somewhat a little cheesy, you might say. Not really meant to be like the 100% truth, but more or less an intermission break that we can go through here and add this part into the episode. So thank you for watching. I'm not sure, I haven't really checked on a lot of the tech today, so I hope things are going just as well as they should, and no major issues, it looks like. No getting kicked off of the old GooTube yet for reading these articles into the record that I don't think they want you looking at, and that's why I will make them easily available in the show. And we're also putting this content out on other platforms. You can find me mirrored on Library and BitChute, as well as various audio mirrors, and then on the friend networks of the One Great Work Network and the Grand Theft World website. And then tomorrow we're going to go into some of the topics I have for intermission. We'll go into deeper on the Grand Theft World podcast tomorrow, but I'm going to touch on a few things when we get back here, including Gates' new book that I got. We're going to deep dive into a DARPA document, go into some of the things that they have planned for us in the near future. DARPA's been around a lot with the things that are going a lot. They're kind of like the military side of the sweater vest Bill Gates character. They're like the underbelly of the Pentagon and the research that goes on there into these things like insects and other bio weapons that they're planning to use in our very near future. if not already in wide use at the moment. But anyway, let me not fumble along and stumble along and get into this clip so we can come back and uncover more of the Bio-PsyWar as we move forward today. Thank you very much for watching.